Hey everybody, this is Russ from Retro Game Core, and my retail unit of the GPD Win 4 just arrived. If you watched my review video, you may remember that I received a loaner unit, and after making that review, I basically fell in love with the handheld, and so I bought my own right before the Indiegogo campaign ended a couple months ago. Now, since then, I've been in contact with a developer who is interested in doing some optimization work with the GPD Win 4, and so I've decided to send this unit to them so they can do a bunch of great work with it, and then once the Win 4 goes to actual retail, I'm going to buy it again. But before I sent it out to them, we agreed to do a quick unboxing and impressions video right here so we can get an idea of what the retail experience is going to be like if you do happen to pick one of these up. So this should be a pretty quick video here. Now in terms of the box and all that, I think it's all pretty standard fare. It comes with a screen protector, a 65-watt charging brick, as well as a nice little lanyard right here. We also have a high quality USB-C charging cable, and then this little plastic right here is supposed to go on the bottom in case you need to pry the other one off in order to get inside the device. Now let's take a look at the final retail unit. And upon first appearance here, it looks like the shoulder buttons are a little bit darker, but everything else seems to be the same. It's definitely still a very thick handheld, which I actually like. On the back, it looks like the ridges here on the grip are a little bit more pronounced, and these have a hard plastic feel to them. They feel really good, a lot like an Xbox controller. Another thing I wanted to verify is that yes, the start button here is labeled correctly as start, and it looks like most of the other controls are the same. Now, one thing I was nervous about was the slide out screen just to make sure it was going to be nice and tight. In fact, this actually feels a little bit tighter than it was on the review unit. It slides up and down with a very satisfying click, and yeah, I think this is going to last for a long time to come. Looking at the controls, we'll start with the D-pad. So this one feels exactly like it did before. It's a lot like a PS Vita's D-pad, but maybe a little bit tighter. It has a soft clickiness to it, and I just love the feel. The analog stick here is also unchanged. It definitely has a larger range and size than the Nintendo Switch Joy-Con. It almost feels like a smaller version of an Xbox joystick. I was hoping that they were going to replace the cap on the stick itself, just because it looks a little bit cheap, but I have found that Nintendo Switch Joy-Con covers work really well in a pinch. Also on the bottom left here, we have a fingerprint sensor. Now I'm not going to set this up just because I'm about to ship this one out, but we will test to make sure it's being recognized in the software. Let's take a look at the face buttons on the right side. These are just like the review unit as well. They seem a lot like the PS Vita buttons with that same soft, shallow click. Also on the right side, we have that little optical mouse nub, which also seems to be the same as in my review. Up top, the I/O seems to be the same, power, volume, and then the two USB ports. One thing I was hoping they would change is the direction of the volume up and down. For me, I would prefer to have the volume up on the right side versus the left. And sometimes I would press the wrong one in the review unit, and so this is probably going to be the same problem here. But I do love that we have a USB 4 port here on the top, as well as a full-sized USB-A port. Now these shoulder buttons have been darkened a little bit, and initially I was a little bit torn about this. I almost feel like they should either be completely black or white, but at least when it comes to the actual feel of these buttons, they feel good. They have a similar soft clickiness to them, and I think the travel is just about right. Now moving over to the back, we have our trigger buttons. If you remember from my review, I wasn't 100% sold on the design here, and it does seem like this is exactly the same as it was on my review unit. The trigger itself pivots down when you press on it. It kind of feels like it's set up on a hinge. And personally, I feel like that downward motion just doesn't feel as smooth and as nice as it does on other controllers. I would have greatly preferred something like the Xbox design where the button itself just kind of goes straight down instead of at an angle. Regardless, I don't think that they're terrible buttons right here. I like the fact that they're analog triggers and they have a good amount of travel too. In the end, when actually holding the device in the hands, everything feels just exactly the same as it did on my review unit. So all the buttons are easily accessible, and it does have a nice ergonomic feel to it thanks to the roundedness of the sides and the overall thickness of the device. Needless to say, I'm super happy with how this feels in the hand. Looking at the back here, we have these two hotkey menu buttons. You can assign these to whatever you want within the software. And then we have a massive fan intake vent right here on the back. It also looks like they've added a GPD logo here above that. Looking at the bottom, we have this little clip right here, which I think is for the LTE module, or maybe their upcoming dock. And then we have another USB-C port here on the bottom. And then of course, my biggest gripe about the GPD Win 4 was the placement of the speakers, and these are unchanged. And so depending on the size of your hands and your playstyle, you may end up muffling the audio with the meat of your palms. Anyway, let's go ahead and start up the device right here, and as you can see, the LED lights are working right off the bat. This was something that wasn't working on my review unit at the time. As you can see, it cycles through a variety of colors, and I can see here why GPD went with a darker tone with the shoulder buttons, because it gives it a nice subdued look, and I kind of like it. Now, because I'm not keeping this unit, I'm just going to set up a quick dummy profile right here in Windows, And it's funny, my first reaction here was to try to type on the on-screen keyboard. I literally forgot that I had a keyboard underneath the screen. And I love the convenience of having a physical keyboard right here and there. And just to verify here, yes, it is registering the fingerprint sensor. Now, I've read somewhere that there are some issues with the preloaded Windows image that they have on this device. And so a lot of people have just been wiping this completely and then adding their own Windows installation as well as their own drivers. And honestly, that's probably something I would do just if this was my own unit right here. Either way, you can see they have some preloaded software right here, the Motion Assistant app, as well as Win controls. And I showed these off in my review, but essentially they'll allow you to adjust things like TDP on the fly. I'm going to turn the screen brightness down to 0 so we can get a better look at these shoulder buttons. And you can see here, yeah, they're cycling through these LED colors and it looks pretty nice. At first I thought it was going to be a bit gimmicky, but honestly, I think I'm going to keep them on. Now, as an aside, in my AYANEO Plus review, I mentioned that I wanted to compare the size of these two devices, and now that I have them both here in the studio, let's go ahead and take a look. And really, the Air Plus is not that much larger than the Win 4, and the screen size, chipset, and resolution are exactly the same between the two. And even though the size difference is slight, I still prefer how compact the GPD Win 4 is overall. And of course, I love the creature comforts of having a physical keyboard and analog nub. If I was king for a day, I would trade out the analog triggers between the two so I could have the AYANEO Air Plus triggers in the Win 4. But other than that, if I had to pick only one of these two, I would definitely be picking the Win 4 all day. And a lot of that really does come down to that smaller size and compact nature. This is the handheld I want to bring out with me anytime I leave the house and I want to have something with a little bit more power. Now, as you can imagine, I'm not interested in logging into my Steam account and downloading a bunch of games. So instead, I'm going to plug in this USB drive that's already been preloaded with all my emulators and ROMs. And again, this is where those physical controls really come in handy. I can use the analog nub here to move around the mouse very easily. So I can go to the menus and start up my Wii U emulator, which has already been pre-configured. And just like that, I'm jumping into Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Couple quick comments right here. Number one, yes, the analog sticks still feel great. And as much as I like to gripe about the analog triggers, honestly, when I'm actually playing them, I never really noticed that issue. I think if they had a better design, I would probably appreciate them more, but as it stands right now, when I'm actually in the game, I never even notice. So you can take that for what it's worth, but in practice, it does not take away from my gaming experience. Now, obviously, I'm only going to briefly play this game, but at least here in the default settings, it's working just fine. I'm playing the game in a native resolution. I don't have MSI Afterburner installed, so I can't tell you the frames per second. But all the same, this feels very smooth. Definitely over 30 frames per second, probably closer to 40 or so. And again, I didn't even go in and adjust the TDP or anything. I just started up CMU here directly from Windows. And honestly, this is a great gaming experience. And it's funny, but one of the things I enjoy the most about this experience is the ability to be able to get out of the game very quickly. All I have to do is slide up my screen, show the keyboard, press escape, and then I can close right out of the emulator. If you've ever used a handheld PC, you know that that can be quite a pain unless you pre-set up a bunch of hotkeys. Anyway, while we're in here, let's go ahead and test out one other game. I want to do something that's a little bit more D-pad centric. And so here we are navigating into New Super Mario Bros. U. And the D-pad here feels great. I think it's going to be good for any sort of platformer. Although admittedly, having to press down on the X button and then press A is a little bit cramped here on the right side. It's just that the analog stick gets a little bit in the way of me pressing down on the A button with the meat of my thumb. And honestly, that's a little bit rare when you have to do that. It's mostly going to be like Mario games and maybe Donkey Kong Country. And so I would say the multi-button experience right here is not as great as it could be, but at this point I'm probably just being nitpicky. And so in wrapping things up here, I walked away from these quick impressions with two thoughts. Number one, this really goes to show that GPD did a great job with the initial design, because there are hardly any changes from the original review unit. And for me, I couldn't be happier. That means that the experience that I had in my review is going to be the same that everyone else is going to have with their retail units. And my second thought here is that even though I'm sending off this Win 4 here, and honestly that does make me a little bit sad, the other thought that I had is that I'm looking forward to buying this again. Even now that I have more handheld PCs in my studio than before, I still think the Win 4 is the one to get if you want something smaller than the Steam Deck. So in the end, yes, I still heartily recommend the GPD Win 4, and while 6 months from now there will be even more choices available, I still think that the Win 4 is going to be a good experience no matter what. Anyway, that's really about it for my impressions here. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and as always, thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful, and we will see you next time. Happy gaming!